Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of Sagionic 1027. We are so glad that you decided to join us today. And with us, without fail, we have another one of those guests that are like, yay! Today we have with us Soorin Becker and
Backer.
Backer. I told myself to say it
It's
right.
good.
Soorin Backer. And I am besides myself to be able to hear what she's going to release today. Soorin is one of those women that behind the scenes, she has been diligent in every single thing she has touched. um, no compromise, no backing down. And with her being a mom, that even in rearing her children, she was not willing to allow there to be lackadaisicalness. She wasn't willing to just let them kind of sort of maybe we might try. And so I'm excited not only for people to become familiar with her, but to see what it is that's in store for her own children. So, welcome to our program today, Soorin. We are so glad you're here. We're going to touch on several areas today. We're going to touch a little bit on your book on women in Jesus's life, but as what's most important is like what is right there within you that you just want to release to the world. And so, welcome to our program today. Today's program
Thank
is
you.
all about you.
Oh, thank you for the invite, Sean. I'm super excited to be here. I really cut out a lot of media. I was in so many different kinds of media platforms doing TV and radio. I really cut that down a lot. But you and I, we've seen each other and we've kind of developed a friendship here. So it was very special to me, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, good. So let's start a little bit with your book, okay? But we don't have to stay there. We can move, but share a little bit with our viewers about your book. So Soren has released a book within the last couple of months. It's Women in Jesus's Life, and well, of course, we know the first one was Mary, right? But share with us, what was the backdrop? What was the thought that came to you that you couldn't let go of it?
Well, I wrote this back in 2011, actually.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
when the idea came to me, someone suggested that I start writing devotionals or blogs because it was my first conference I was speaking at. And I was like, I don't want to write. I hate writing. I still don't enjoy writing. So I really resisted it, and then she just really encouraged me, the people around me. How about just like one blog or one devotional, just to give away at the conference or something. So I sat down, and what ended up coming out was the entire chapter of the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. And it was like, 5 or 6 pages. And I was like, how do I splice this and maybe make this into like a 10-day devotional? And I was trying to logically figure out how to do this. I heard an internal voice very loudly saying, why don't you make this the first chapter of your book? And I was like, oh, Lord, I don't want to write a book. I hate writing and I don't feel like I have anything to say. And the title came to me, and the Lord said to me, call it Women in Jesus's Life. Oh, and I just fell in love with the title because I've never wanted to be, um, have Jesus as a part of my life, be that woman. I wanted to be a woman that was a part of his life that's so much bigger and grander and mysterious and adventurous than mine. And I just really fell in love with the title. And when I looked on Amazon and other places, there was no other book by that title, at least at that time. I think a few years later, somebody also took that title. But then it just kind of sat, I published it to a friend. So fast forward 12 years later, it's 2023, and we are now in the process of making this book into a combination of movies and series to be released. So we're just in the beginning phase. I've just formed my what we call Nabi Media Productions company. Nabi in Hebrew means prophet or prophetic, and Nabi in Korean, which is my background, means butterfly, which to me means metamorphosis and transformation and truly becoming what you were meant to become. And I think that is the age that we're in right now.
That's right. That's right. And needed because, there was a book that I read years ago back in the late 90s. Okay. It was called Being Happy by Matthew Andrews or Andrew Matthew. I might have the words flipped around. He showed in there that it's a comical book. It's one that you'd want to get for all your kids, like literally Being
Okay.
Happy. There's comic strips but there's so much truth to it, right? But he shows this guy who is chanting or touting, "I will never be like my dad," as he's sitting on the couch with his arms folded or one arm folded and the boob tube changer in his hand. Well, right above the guy is a picture of his dad in the same position.
Wow.
So our words really mean a lot. So if we're speaking the never instead of the doing or what we're perceiving, right? So you said Nabi was just, you guys, did Nabi, but that came from something too. So
Hmm.
with creative minds out there, that's what we want to do. We want to ignite the creative minds. So how did
Yeah.
you go from the book to this is we've got to do this? And tell me like, cuz how it says iron sharpens iron, or if it says from the multitude of counsel there's wisdom, right? So share how that came to be.
Well, I think back in 2011 when I wrote this book, I just thought I did it for this conference and maybe we'll sell a few books. We ended up selling like 1,000 copies, I think, in the first year. Just by word of mouth, just by taking it to the places I spoke at.
Okay.
And it was not as clean as I wanted, and it
Okay.
initially had only 10 chapters.
Okay.
So then I don't know, I think like a year or a couple of years later, there was a series called The Bible. And I think it was Roma Downey Jr., and it was like a 10-part series. And I watched it and I was very excited for the biblical stories to be told. And I just had this dream. I'm like, I wish we could tell stories about women in the Bible, not these stories about like Samson and David, like people, they know these stories. But my book, excuse me, literally is about the 5 women in Jesus's genealogy and 5 women he interacted with while he was on earth. And so, fast forward a few years later, when my friend wanted to publish my book under her publishing company called Above the Sun, she says, Soorin, you're missing a few words. You need like a couple of thousand more words to actually list this book eligible to be a bestseller. I'm like, oh, Alicia, I don't know that this is ever going to be a bestseller. She goes, well, let's just try. Why don't you add another chapter? So as I was sitting with the Lord, what the Lord was saying, there's a really, really important woman in Jesus's genealogy that you did not include. She's not in Matthew's chapter of the begats, but it's Sarah. It's Abraham's wife who, out of barrenness in this covenant, birthed Isaac. So I did the chapter on Sarah, and so the chapters in the book are chronological. But after I published that, fast forward to like 2023 at the beginning, I just started getting connected to people who were in the Hollywood industry who were very excited and thought this original content about never told stories of these women from this original perspective, not just faith based, but also psychological, emotional. What are these women going through? Cultural context. Really unpacking these stories and figuring out why are these women included in the biblical narratives? That's eternal. We tend to gloss over these women and just we get familiar with the stories, but we don't really understand the impact these women had in the history of Israel and in who Jesus is. And that's why Matthew included these specific women in the genealogy. So I'm super excited because I think our first episode is almost done. It's the story of Sarah, and we're telling the story of the covenant of Abraham and Isaac through Sarah's eyes, which has never been done before from a woman's perspective. And really, when you look at Abraham's covenant, it's really a Saraic covenant because Abraham had 8 sons. He had Ishmael, he had Isaac, he had 6 more sons with Keturah when Sarah passed away. But the only son that Isaac is to Sarah, not only the only son, but the only child. And when Abraham said to God, why can't you bless Ishmael? He's my son. God said, no, it has to be through Sarah. So because Abraham and Sarah is one flesh, God is saying this is also Sarah's covenant when he's calling it Abraham's covenant. But we tend to take it literally, and we just kind of gloss over Sarah, and we make this woman like a woman of like little faith. And we get confused about why she's included in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11, but there's a reason for it. There's a progression of her story, many chapters about Sarah. So I really am excited about the first episode that we've written. It's 2 hours long, and it's going to be phenomenal. And we literally did a test run with kids who are like, I call them kids. They're in the mid-20s, late 20s. They've already graduated from performing arts schools. Some of them have scholarships for screenwriting. These are like professional, well-trained young adults. Some of them are Christian, some of them are not. Some of them are agnostic, atheist. They were like a mixed group. And they read the episode. And what they said was, because initially we only had 1 hour. What they said was, you got to give us more. We're interested in this story and we're unpacking this, but like there's too many gaps. Like what happened here? What happened there? And it made this entire group run to the Bible and read the story for themselves and read it through the perspective of Sarah and not necessarily Abraham. That's been kind of ingrained in us. So it's switching, their mindset a little bit, and it's making them interested. And this group was men and women. It wasn't just young women. It was also men. And there is a huge hunger, especially in the next generation, for the story of humanity to be told. The stories of humanity with God, not just the male perspective. So I think there is a hunger, and the series, the stories, this movie is going to fill a void that no one's really filling right now. And I have a Ph.D. level education in clinical psychology. I'm going for a doctorate in theology right now. So it sets me up for a very unique perspective of marrying the emotional, the soul issues with the spiritual.
That's right. And if we think of Sarah, which a lot of people don't, really think about this, talk about, we've heard the terminology in our lifetime behind every man who's a leader or an iconic figure in history, there's a good woman, right? We hear this, right? Now let's think of this. Talk about being betrayed. Not once, but twice did her husband say, she's my sister. Right. We don't.
Right.
And then she stayed with him. Right. And or they focus on, but Hagar, she lost her faith. Well, one thing I like about Soorin's book that I think was like genius is she put a prayer in there after each chapter, like kind of like a guideline, and not a prayer that you have to stick to, but a guideline. And then she put questions for us to ponder on, but then she included in it the written biblical manuscript of what the details was. So it's all in one. One thing I like about what you said about Sarah was in your question, you said, what is something in your life where you've tried to call the shots, or you've tried to be the God, right? Or another one of the chapters, you said, what are some idols in your life that you have set up? Okay, so maybe without you, so explain idols, because we know idols in the form of the biblical realm or in the form of what I'm going to call Christendom, okay? But break down idols in a manner that somebody who doesn't know Jesus, somebody who's never read the Bible, break that down so that people would know what it's like to have something bigger in your life than it should be when there's something so much bigger in your life that could be.
That's a great question, and it's a great way to word that question. Thank you.
I didn't get
So
it.
I've been actually, I've actually been pondering that question a lot lately, because the Lord's doing such an inner work in me and challenging the idols in my life, idols that I didn't think were there, because many of the idols we carry are unconscious. Consciously, no believer in Jesus would be like, yeah, I have an idol. No one would say that. But we can identify the idols we have by the way we function.
That's
By
right.
the practical way we make decisions and how we live. So an idol, in essence, in the Old Testament, was any kind of figure that represented creation. So some kind of creation was formed into this image, or a statue, or a carved image of wood, and people will bow to it as if it had the power to grant them whatever they desire, to grant them healing, their petitions. And they would offer sacrifices to these idols. And so that was also, a very primitive picture, but it really shows us what's happening in our lives now, because whatever we bow to that's created in nature rather than creator who cannot be formed, then we have idols. For instance, for us, it's not a wooden image or a stone image. For us, it's things created like community, like fear of man, like finances, money, economy, fear of failure. Our fear of failure really is fear of other people looking at us like a failure and we're worthless. So it's really about creation and their judgment and their assessment of us rather than the creator. So anything in us that exalts in the sense of like, this is the thing that actually sets my emotional temperature, that is an idol. So if we have anxiety because we feel like people are accusing us, especially if it's unjust accusation or if it's distortion or partial truths, how many have you been there? One of the questions in my book is not just, hey, who has betrayed you, but who have you betrayed?
That's right. That's
Because
right.
we need to really start looking at what we do and own our part. Otherwise, we'll foster the victim mentality
That's
and we'll
right.
always think the world is wrong, but we're justified in our wrongs. And the Bible says the Lord hates imbalanced scales. When we have a different scale for other people than us, where we justify our wounds and our coping mechanism, but we cannot have grace for somebody else, that's an imbalanced scale. It's an
That's
unbalanced
right.
scale.
That's right.
So our idolatry reveals what emotional thing we are attached to. It's not just hyper spirituality.
Uh-huh.
It's about, okay, what is setting the temperature of your day today?
Huh.
Maybe it's a text that you got from somebody that you thought was for you, and suddenly you get an attack out of the blue. And then,
Huh.
sure, we're going to have a horrible feeling about it. It never feels good. But how long does it last? And where does the
That's
trail of your thoughts
right.
go?
That's
Does the
right.
trail of your thoughts go to, oh my gosh, now she's going to turn that person against me and I'm going to lose this relationship. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose that. My reputation is going to be in shreds and I don't get to vindicate myself. That's revealed your idol right
That's
there.
right. That's
It's
right.
the fear of man.
That's right.
And this
That's
is
right.
something the Lord's really dealing with me because I'm in leadership in multiple aspects of the kingdom. It's a weird story how I got there. I didn't intend to be there, but here I am. So when you're a leader, people always have unbalanced scales towards you. And that's why leadership is hard. They expect you to behave perfectly, handle everything perfectly, and their communication, dysfunction, distortion, coping mechanism, woundings are something that you have to manage for them. That's something I really want to change in the kingdom.
That's
It's
right.
that leaders and those who follow, we have taught it's okay to have unbalanced scales. Hey, leaders, take it, take it. Sure, we do, and I do. However, my goal is to make everyone around me leaders as well. So then the only way to do that is to have a balanced scale where we all learn healthy emotional management and we don't expect somebody else to manage our emotions for us. So my ministry is a lot about soul health
That's right. That's
because the
right.
Bible says, as your soul prospers, you will prosper.
That's right. That's right. And one thing I really value, and I thought of when you were sharing there towards the end was I would have to say the biggest area in, I guess I would call it more Pentecostal charismatic movements. I'm gonna use
Yeah.
those terminologies together. The biggest misled terminology is the devil is the prince of the power of the air, and they're giving him all. So talk about passing the buck on to somebody else, right? And there's been this delusion that he's omnipresent. There's delusion that he's so high and mighty, and it actually takes the ownness off of the human, right,
Hmm.
and puts it
Yeah.
on something or someone else.
Yeah.
And then I also like what you shared, Soorin, is the importance as, okay, so you have a little glitch that takes place in your life. Don't let that glitch define you.
Yeah.
So with that, I was fascinated to read about Mary Magdalene and what her name actually meant. I was like,
Mm.
what? That's incredible. So can you share a little bit about her story, but her original, definition of who she was created to be?
Yeah, if I can remember, when I wrote about Mary, her name means like a strong tower. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or it could mean she's from a city called Migdal. And I actually visited that city when I went to Israel. And they built this beautiful, beautiful place of worship to honor her in that place. So Mary to me is such a picture of like Israelites in slavery and going through the wilderness, getting deliverance, and then crossing into the promised land. And it's such a picture of all of us because we all start believing lies. And when we go, well, we were demonized or the devil made me do it, that kind of language automatically disempowers humanity that God said, I give you all authority and power.
That's right.
Now, what you empower and what you give authority to will now have a say in the atmosphere around you. So we've kind of been taught to be disempowered. And even the old deliverance model where somebody's like, I can't do this and I've been bedeviled and I'm tormented. And then we go to the big figure, holding the mic or holding the power, and we get deliverance, and that person has the authority to like set you free. Then we walk away and we've set up these people to be even more demonized because we have not taught them they have the power
That's
to
right.
close the door or open the door. And
That's
so I
right.
really like the new deliverance model of inner healing, where it's like, let's first take care of the issues that brought these demons in, where you started to believe these lies. Let's
That's right.
get rid of the lies and start to believe the truth about who God says you are. And then we break agreement and just expel the devil. It doesn't have to be a huge power struggle, because
That's
once they
right.
don't have a place to feast off of or hold on to, they're gone. And so this is what I like to teach in Genesis. When you go to Genesis 3, there I have a whole teaching on Genesis 1, 2, and 3 that turns the paradigm of religion that we've been passed on to. We believe for so many years. It's a 6-hour teaching, but I'm going to give you a little nugget
Okay.
that blew my mind that the Lord gave me. And so when creation fell, when the devil came and tempted and seduced the man and the woman into believing a lie, the Lord immediately set into the plan of redemption.
That's right.
So it wasn't curses like, oh, Adam, oh, Eve, I'm going to punish you. No, the only person being punished, only being punished in this place was the devil,
Yep.
because he says, now you're lower than the cattle of the earth.
Yeah.
So it's not like God is saying, you're like a cow. And he's saying you're going to be eating dust and you're going to be like crawling on your belly. It's not about snakes. It's not about literal snakes. In this momentous occasion, God is not thinking about animals and what they're going to eat. Okay. So what he's saying to the devil is, you have lost all rank.
That's right.
So in my creation, you were an archangel, like a 5-star general. And now I am stripping you of all rank. You have no authority anymore. You are lower even than the animals that crawl the earth right now in my eyes. And then God says, now you will eat dust. So hold that. Then you go to a few verses later. I can't remember the numbers now. But God says to Adam, from dust you came and to dust you will return when you die.
Okay.
So it's the same word. You will eat dust. You will return to dust. Those are the same words. What is God saying? Because this dust that Adam becomes is the devil's food. What is that? So God is saying to the devil, you cannot eat off of life. There's life in joy, peace, forgiveness, mercy, unconditional love, gentleness, all that good stuff that we talk about as the fruit of the Spirit. It tastes better in the spirit realm. And God says, I'm protecting my children. You will not eat off of life and take that away and steal it from my children. You will now eat only off of death, things pertaining to death, like jealousy, envy, unforgiveness, bitterness, resentment, regret, judgment, condemnation, hatred, rivalry, slander, gossip, imbalanced scales. You will only eat off of the things that pertain to death, because you will not eat off of life. And that's why the devil's going insane, because all his food is rotten. And Jesus himself calls the devil Lord of the Flies, Beelzebub. Well, where do you find flies? where maggots are. And what do maggots do? They
Ah.
eat rotten food that have died.
Ah.
So when people come to me, and this is where they get this illusion that the devil is everywhere, the devil is attacking me, the devil's attacking me, I'm under attack. My first question is always, what kind of food are you laying out for him?
That's right. Oh,
Maybe
gosh.
the demons are starving and they need food, and you are speaking words of death. You are putting out the atmosphere of hatred, envy, religious condemnation, unforgiveness, bitterness, regret that you can't forgive yourself. You know, what are the words, what are the thoughts and feelings you're giving off? And the devil's hungry, his minions, his demons are hungry, and they're going, we need something dying to feed off of. And
Mm,
they may find us, and it may not be a
mm.
spiritual attack. It just may be we're laying out a feast for the devil and his minions, and they're coming. So the only time we're actually under spiritual attack is when we're moving forward in such a way that we're advancing the kingdom.
That's
You know,
right.
we're setting people free,
That's
like
right.
like we are doing right now.
That's right.
But if
That's
we're
right.
home and we're like, oh, I don't know how God's going to come through for me. I need finances. I don't have open doors. I don't have favor. All those religious people will not open doors for me. Don't they recognize I'm a prophet? And when we start speaking words like that, the devil's like, whoa, it's not them attacking you. It's just
Ah.
we've spoken things into the atmosphere that's like food for the enemy, and they need to eat. So the
That I
first
have.
question always
It's
is,
so good.
first question always should be, am I really under attack because I'm advancing? Or is it because I am literally in doubt and fear and anxiety and anger or bitterness or judgment? Or I have an imbalanced scale. And I go, yeah, in this situation, you know I said this and it was wrong, but it's because I was going through this in my life. But then this person did this. How do you know what they were going through? So it's
Exactly.
that unbalanced scale we engage in every single day. And that actually feeds the religious demons. It's not just from the leaders, you know. The religious beasts that get fed in the church is also by the people who are sitting in the pews. And this is the thing I want to change.
Yeah.
So I don't like religious hierarchy in the sense
Uh-huh.
like the
Uh-huh.
leader has to always give permission. You have to
Mm-hmm.
run everything through by the leader, and they even have to tell you who you can date or where to move. That's ridiculous. The whole point of spirituality and maturing is empowerment. God
That's
is
right.
looking for mature sons,
That's right.
not sons who are constantly asking, "Can I eat?" Potato chips today, mom? Can I have an egg for breakfast? God's not looking for an immature toddler. He's asking for mature sons who know what's good for their bodies. That's how we want to raise the body of Christ. So I'm not for religious hierarchy where the person in charge or the board or the church leaders has to give you permission for the calling over your life. That's ridiculous because
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to answer for my people's calling, right?
That's
My
right.
sheep that
That's
God has entrusted me with,
right.
they have to answer to the Lord. My job is to be the foundation, empower them.
Yep.
However, I don't like that religious mindset of, okay, you're the leader, you set the example, and so your bar is this, and our bar is here, and that's okay. That
Huh.
means you will always be disempowered. You will always need a leader, and you will never know how to manage yourself and prosper in your own soul.
That's
My
right.
goal as a leader is to bring everybody to a balanced scale. It's like, yes, I may be the leader and I may have a vision. The leader is the vision that empowers people to live out this vision of kingdom the best that we can and to constantly speak the vision, right? And protect the vision. That is the leader. We'll always have leaders.
Yes.
But my job is to make leaders out of everybody who's around me. That's apostolic. And
That's
so
right.
when they
That's
become
right.
leaders, they multiply and their health level comes up.
That's
And then
right.
they start to bring up the health level of other people who follow them.
That's
So
right.
when we say religious mindset, I'm a little tired of using that to accuse all the leaders. We have to
I
start
just
taking
this
management
this
for our
is
own
this is so
soul.
good. So what you wrote in your book from Mary Magdalene, she was her birthright was the apostle to the apostles.
And
The
apostle of the apostles.
Yeah, apostle of the apostles, right? And so
Apostolorum is the original term that was
yeah.
attributed to her when she was
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the
So
early church writers said that.
yeah. So this is so good because this is how life should be. it should be that you want to see the success of everybody else around you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I remember somebody saying to me once in my former industry, well, don't you concern yourself with competition? I go, there is no competition. There
That's
is
right.
no
There isn't.
competition, right? Even
That's right.
with starting a broadcast, there is no competition. Well, what do you mean? There is no
Mm-hmm.
competition, right? I just have to walk out what's been laid before me. So behind
That's
this
right.
is another one of the women in your book. So this is an original done by my brother. It's actually the size of a door frame. So it's a monstrous painting,
Mm.
and it's called Rahab's Apparition, right? And so
Wow.
right there, and it's when we have you guys over for dinner sometime, you'll see it close up and all the details of it. It's just, it is a masterpiece, right? And we think of she and what she did that was necessary, right? And so all throughout not only biblical history, but if we look back in any of our family lines, we're going to see things, okay? And when we
Yeah.
think of family line, I think of two things. One, I think of the purpose driven life. In there, I love that he said, your very DNA that was needed was in your father, your paternal father, and your paternal mother, right? It was in it. One thing that Soorin said that was just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. This is so good. This is so good. She said, let's pretend, we can throw the verse out there that says a house divided against itself cannot stand. Do
Yeah.
not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. But we don't know at what time in somebody's human history that they became aware. And I like to use the word aware of how much the Lord loves them, because he's always known them, but we have not consciously known him. Okay. So in there, talk about the power of functioning in love, beauty, joy, kindness, patience in the midst of, here's two human beings, image bearers. Call everybody image bearers, right? Here's two human beings, and one person becomes aware of the love of the Lord and decides to follow him wholeheartedly. Talk about grace in a marriage, in a relationship with a partner, in a
Yeah.
family unit. Talk about grace and how you can speak life and not think that you're better than everybody else in your family.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question too. And that's literally what happened in my family, and it's what happened around me when I say I didn't want to be a leader. When people started to recognize that in me and kind of place me there, and then the Lord just started to open doors. So the essence of leadership is influence, right? If you cannot influence anyone, then you're not a leader. The essence of leadership should not be control,
That's right.
because if you're controlling and you are using your power to manipulate, you're not a leader, you're a dictator. And you are literally an agent of the enemy that has taken away the free will of the people around you. The essence of leadership is to influence by example, by words, by love and kindness, what God does to influence our free will so that we want to be with him. God does not force us to be with him. God does not force his way. He has all the power to do that, but because in essence he's love, he fosters freedom, because without freedom there is no real love. You and I know that. You cannot force love on somebody. I cannot force my kids. I can pick out, their wives or their friends and go, you have to love them. It doesn't work like that. It's based on freedom. They get to choose. So the question of how do you do this is because, Jesus's parable of when you've been forgiven much, you forgive much, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
we combine many parables here, but the essence of Jesus is like, who loves me more? The one that knows how much they've been forgiven. So I understand that part of it. It's when I want to get angry about somebody slandering me and gossiping about me, because that is probably the number one attack that a leader goes through, is the gossip, the slander, the distorted views, the one-sided story where they kind of paint themselves in a really good picture and paint you in the worst possible light, and then you hear it back and you're like, I've got proof on my texts. And then you don't get to show people the texts. That's grace. Even if they are sharing a very one-sided story, you don't get to like vindicate yourself and show people this communication and go, do you see the unhealth I'm dealing with? You don't get to do that. You sometimes have to just show grace by going, okay, there's gossip and slander. Obviously, there's a damage here, there's a wounding. And I
Mm-hmm.
normally don't take it personally because usually when people have that kind of reaction, it's a trigger. Something triggered them, especially when the interaction was very neutral or positive and it gets triggered sideways. Has nothing to do with me. This is something that they have to work out. So learning not to take it personally is the number one thing in showing grace. However you and I react to things, it very little has to do with the person in front of us and what they're presenting. Because the person in front of me, if they're a ranting lunatic, rageaholic, I don't have to get hooked into that. That's their
Uh-huh.
issue. But if I hook into it, that means I had that rage and the ranting lunatic inside of me as well, and so the similar spirits found each other. So that says a lot, right? And so how I deal with things around me reveals me.
That's
It
right.
doesn't reveal the other person or the situation. Everything I do reveals me. So, in that sense, I am not perfect in my reactions. I am not perfect in my emotions or the way I manage my emotions. So, as soon as I recognize my damage, even if I have a little bit of this and they have a gigantic ball of that, a little bit of poop and a gigantic pile of poop, same thing. We don't want to touch either. You know what I mean? So, I don't get to judge the lot. I'm being a little bit graphic, but it's true. Any kind of thing that the enemy wants to feed off of, if I have even a smidgen of it, I do not get to judge and condemn. And that's the walk of grace. I really think healthy soul management comes down to brutal self honesty. You
That's
can't
right.
have a balanced scale without really knowing yourself. And you can't really walk in grace if you don't know yourself. But when you know
Mm-hmm.
yourself and you know your own struggles, even if your struggle is different than mine, I can have compassion and go, wow, I need Jesus in this area. So she needs Jesus in a different area.
That's
It
right.
doesn't make us different. It doesn't make me better.
That's right.
And I think that's the essence of influence, is
Uh-huh.
constantly showing that humble example that I haven't arrived anywhere. I may be a little healthier than you in one area, but it doesn't mean I'm healthier than you in another area. So it's that posture of humility and the willingness to let the Lord convict and deal with us, and my desire to manage myself and my emotions, but I have no desire to manage yours and tell you what kind of person you need to be. That's between you and the Lord.
That's right. And there's a lot of freedom in what you just said,
Mm-hmm.
because if you just focus on, and it's funny because it's almost potentially it could sound like a societal oxymoron if you just focus on me, myself, and I, right?
Yeah.
Becoming a better version of you, right? And when
Yeah.
you like go into that inner healing, and sorting through you, you will be better everywhere else. You will be able to help other people. And not only that, but when you are functioning who you are called to be, whether it doesn't matter what station you're at. Okay, you just started out being a cook in a school cafeteria, right? If you be the best version of yourself, you are going to encourage others too to be the best version of themselves. So,
Right.
regardless of where you are, regardless of what setting you are, bobbing around on planet Earth, you can step into any environment and see beauty in everyone. And
Amen.
I love that. I loved being able to just see, like, to pull out the gifts, the talents, and the abilities, right? In
Yeah.
other people. You can do it
Yeah.
anywhere.
Exactly.
I really like you sharing with our viewers that instead of I'm going to call it jumping the gun, instead of jumping the gun to react,
Hmm.
pause for a second. What's
Yeah.
going on in the other person's life? What kind of hurts? Because everybody has a story. I do not care
Yeah.
if you are in a church and they are holy rollers. Everybody has a story. Everybody has stuff
Hmm.
behind the woodwork going. Everybody has stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
And to,
Yeah.
to come together to be a support system instead of putting somebody's painting up on the wall and throwing darts at it, right?
Yeah.
Because when we
Yeah.
do that, I'll never forget there was somebody who's a parent and was undergoing a horrific, such slanderous situation because of choices
Mm.
one of the children had made, right?
Wow.
And immediately my compassion was for the parent, but also for the child. But being a mom of
Hmm.
children, it was like the Lord showed me, to the degree you judge this family, those same judgments will come back into your family. And I was like, gasped, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to sit there and scorn somebody else's, right? Um,
Yeah.
so for somebody, so just for our viewers to know, in the body about this interview, you will find all the contact information and how to get a hold of Soorin. Okay, your 6 hour teaching, I am like, that needs to, that needs to get out there because that's
Yeah.
intense. So I value, we still have more time, but I just want to say how much I value you continuing to be a student, not only of the word, but pursuing other studies that can, in essence, help to set minds free, right? Because
Thank you.
we are all adding things, and it started when we were little. So to
Hmm.
help our viewers, I'm going to dig personal inside of you, okay? And you get to choose, okay? Go back in however far you decide to go back. Pick a lie, and I want you to share how lies are embedded into the human mind, and then how we feed those lies. And then once you discover it's a lie, you don't have to continue to walk with that lie.
Yeah. Oh, geez. There were so many that I believed. My background is I had amazing parents who loved the Lord and did the best that they could in the situation that they were in the culture they were in, the training, all of that. So all the qualifiers are there to honor who they are. My mom passed on to heaven 25 years ago. Um, but I grew up with a lot of domestic violence, where I saw my mom being hit, and there were four of us in the family. We were all also physically disciplined. And I'm a pastor's kid, so there was a lot of spiritual abuse and a lot of expectation and pressure. Like, if you do anything, you're going to mess up my ministry. And so, even as a little kid, my entire life was about not messing up somebody else's life and their ministry. I didn't have permission to develop my own identity until very much later. And I had to fight for that permission. I had to figure out a way um, to get out of suicidal depression, and my figuring out the way was challenging Jesus and going, you just have not been good enough in my life. I can't live in this hell anymore. Mentally, emotionally, I just want to die. Either kill me, or I'll kill myself, or you show up as actually kind. I need a kind God. I cannot serve you this way anymore. So you got to remember, I had a PhD level education in clinical psychology already by the time I was 40. I had a master's in theology already from Fuller Theological Seminary, highly esteemed institution. I've been in ministry most of my life. I've been in leadership most of my life. And so many of the lies I believed had to do with God's conditional love. And I'm still shedding that. I'm not there. I'm not in like, he loves me unconditionally mode. I'm still fighting for that. In fact, my latest prayer since last year was, Lord, I want to be the best receiver of your love the world has ever seen. Because prior to that, it was always repentance, purify me, cleanse me, make me righteous, make me like Jesus. I want to think like Jesus, feel like Jesus, do as Jesus, and talk like Jesus. And I'm not there yet. And it's such a good Christian prayer. And I was stuck in that for so long. So last year, the Lord really started to say, okay, can we start to pray about you loving me? That's great. But can you start to pray about you receiving my love for you and starting to understand my love for you? And I'm like, I know your love for me. You love me unconditionally. It's on the cross. I see it. I claim it every day. And I just really felt the conviction of the Holy Spirit going so deep and saying, I want to show you my love, and I want you to receive my love regardless of circumstance. And man, the way he's showing it to me, for some people, it's shown through kindness, and it's shown through like overabundance of blessings. And I have areas where that's happening, but it's also things that I used to interpret as punishment, things that I used to interpret as my failure. And so God is punishing me. God is kind of like bringing into my life and going, are you a failure? Am I punishing me, or am I still good? Do I still love you? And in the midst of that, I'm like, why can't you show me your love with blessings like you do other people? But this is the way he's blessing me. And he's challenging this paradigm. Like, when bad things happen, God is punishing me and I wasn't good enough, because he's good, right? And so I have to repent, and I'm the one that has to change. And so I always overtake responsibility for things I can't even control. And so the Lord's challenging it by literally exposing that and saying, you still have fear of man, you still have fear of rejection, and you still think I punish you. Because what is fear about? Fear has to do with punishment.
That's right.
And he's like, am I in this? Am I good to you? And the craziest thing is, my common emotion before the Lord has always been tears. Whether it's gratitude, whether it's joy, whether it's repentance, I just cry. Like, I should buy stock in Kleenex. I go through boxes of them. I empty out my trash can. It's like, full after every week of spending time with the Lord. But lately, even in the midst of like very difficult things happening personally, ministerially, financially, so many things, I am laughing. And this is the first time in my life that joy is bubbling through when things are happening that feels like an attack. It feels like, it feels painful. It feels like a loss. It feels like a failure. And I just sense the Holy Spirit in me laughing and bubbling up, and I can't help but laugh. And I've never had that before. And I say it took me 54 years to finally get to this place. Rejoice in the Lord always, and finding joy in every circumstance. But that joy is married to understanding, oh my gosh, he loves me so much.
That's right.
He loves me so much. He will not allow me to host this fear. He's challenging this fear. Because if he had just blessed me with overabundance of blessing, it would never have gone to the root.
That's right.
See,
That's
it would have
right.
just been like,
Right.
oh, he loves me with blessings. Great. But the unconditionality of his love would not have been revealed.
That's
as much as when I'm feeling like I'm failing, I failed him,
That's
I'm
right.
losing publicly, and God is going, do I still love you?
Right.
I
That's
just
right.
start to
That's
laugh.
right.
Sean, I just start to laugh.
That's right.
And then like I have a mingling of weeping and laughter. I'm like, of course you still love me. Of
That's
course you're
right.
still for my good. Of course your covenantal promises, you work all things out for my good, because he knows my heart's desire is only to please and delight him. That is settled in his mind. What's not settled is in my heart. Do I know he loves me and he is for me? And in the midst of very painful things happening, the season of turbulence and change, which I think many people are going through right now, because God is positioning us to walk into our promised land. Do you know what happens before he takes us to our promised land? Circumcision.
That's right.
And we can't walk for a while.
Yay!
And they didn't get circumcised in the desert when food was coming down every day and water was coming from the rock, and they were sheltered in the heat and fire, sheltered them at night.
Yeah.
No, they crossed into the promised land, and the day they crossed into the promised land, their food dried up. And 1 million plus people had to figure out how to eat and forage for food in their promised land. And then God literally crippled all the able-bodied men and said, get circumcised in the territory of the enemy, right? And so, and I tell people, do you know that desert life is actually really pleasant and comfortable? The promised land is time for war.
That's right.
God is like, okay, promised land, you want the land flowing with milk and honey? Okay, there's that part. But the other part is you have to dispossess the enemies.
That's right.
You got to face your greatest fear, death, torture, armed battle, swords, and fire and arrows, and enemies charging at you with horses and chariots, and giants in the land that's twice your size. Now you get to go into the promised land and get milk and honey and grapes the size of your head. But before you eat that, we're going to circumcise you. You're going to be in serious pain. You're going to have to find your own food. You're going to starve for the first time. You who have never known the feeling of hunger, you're going to starve. You're going to have to find a way to drink water and feed your children. And now, after that, you get to pick up a sword and go into this land. You get to fight. When people are like, I want my promise, and I'm like, do you? Do you really? When you're whining about the devil coming and feasting off of all the stuff about his powers of darkness that feeds off of and that loves we put it out there so often.
Yeah,
We're like, I'm crippled, the devil's attacking me. Are we really ready for the promised land?
that's
So
right.
I feel like I'm just getting ready because, my book is going to be made into a series,
That's right.
movies. It's going to be my promised land. It's going to
That's
be
right.
warfare to go into the entertainment industry.
That's
Whether
right.
you're a Christian or not, it's going to be warfare,
That's
taking
right.
charge of the land I've never done before. I planted a church, taking charge over things I've never done before. And expecting finances to be there and crazy gobs of money I've never handled before.
Yeah.
And so God's like, okay, you crossed over now, Soorin. So let me circumcise your heart. I'm like, I can't walk. Never mind, wield a sword right now. I just can't walk. But in the midst of that, there is so much joy. I can't
That's
even
right.
explain it to you. It's
That's right.
nonsensical, irrational, divine bubbling forth of joy based on his unconditional love for me, and his promises are true. And I'm in my promised land. I'm looking right at it. I'm looking right at it. And as soon as the season's over and I'm healed from all the circumcision he's doing in my heart, getting rid of all the idolatry, the fear, and all that, I'm going to take my land.
That's
And it's
right.
going to be serious warfare then. I'm not just laying out food for the enemy, I'm attacking him.
That's right. That's right. And if we think of, I like Sean Smith, where he said in one of his teaching, modern day vernacularism. If I can't even, I can see the word
Yeah.
vernacularism. Um, so think of this, because all of those things that you just recited in the battlefield, right? Now attach all of those things to a human being, because it's through a human being that all of this stuff
Right?
comes flying
That's
your
right.
direction, right?
That's right.
So I want to do two things. Okay, we have about 8 minutes left. I want to do two things. One, I'm going to share a quick thing that relates to you, and that is, I remember in 2008, my grandmother, who was not of the Christian religion. Okay, and it's important to say that. I used to say to her, she asked me one day, she quoted myself, I used to say, Lord, gut me of everything that's in me that's displeasing to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had this image that I was never going to attain to nothing, 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 right? She
Right?
said, she
Yeah.
said, Sean, instead of saying that, why don't you ask Heavenly Father to take who it is that He created you to be and use you? And I was like, what? Like,
Yeah. Wow.
if you saw my journals before that and you saw my journals after that, the journals before that were filled with self ridicule, self destructiveness, like
Yeah.
tearing the individual apart, to
Mm-hmm.
then becoming an individual who was powered by who it is that God was and created me to be in His image. Okay?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
is what I would like you to do. Well, and then I saw a visual for you. Okay, okay. So I want you to put yourself on the football field, and I want you to see the banner they make. There's two swords on the banner. One of them says receiver, and the other one says backer. And I was like, you've got to be
Wow.
kidding me. And but they are, but it's a shield. There's a shield, right? And the clash of the titans happen when the backer becomes the receiver and rips through the the veil that has
Yeah.
caused deception to cover up a human being from becoming that receiver.
Yeah.
Okay, so is what I would like you to do, um, Surin, is I would like you to. We have an audience, and our audience, nobody's ever heard about King Jesus, and now you're talking this image bearer stuff and these birthright things and how to become overcomers. Da 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 da. Okay, right where they are, before Jesus, before they even come to know Jesus, because they may not even be interested in Jesus and the Bible, right? I want you to speak to their image bearing self. Speak to the
Mm.
viewers. If you and the viewers are the only ones in the room, you're in a corporate setting, you've been called in, you've got 5,000 people in the audience, you're being paid $150,000 just to be there. And you're going to speak into the audience what is on the forefront of your mind right now.
There's a kind of like a psychological emotional health speak where we identify the false self and the true self. And much of the false self has to do with programming and what's been spoken over us and what we've rehearsed as a self-fulfilling tape in our minds. You know, we have a term in psychology called self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's what you expect, what you believe, what you speak about your life comes to pass. You draw it in, you know. So there is this innate understanding amongst human beings, whether they claim to believe in the spiritual or not. There is an innate understanding we have the spiritual power to attract or to repel certain things in our lives. And much of that has to do with what we believe. So we look for those things and we look for those opportunities, and it attracts those kind of people and those kind of opportunities. And we keep speaking certain things that start to kind of create this reality around us. So there's an innate understanding of that. And I think in some ways, people who are spiritual, who have yet to encounter the love of Jesus and will, but their spirits are like stirred up, they understand this a little better than religious Christians who make everything about just reading the Bible, praying every morning, going to church and singing the right songs and constantly repenting from sin, because that is a very limited way to live. It does not give room for growth. It really doesn't give room for dreams. It doesn't give room for the divine plans of God to manifest in our lives. And so I would say, you know, that part of you that understands what you believe about your life and what you dream of will attract that reality. It's that part that dreams really high things that you can't do for yourself, and the part of you that knows you have a gifting that no one else has really seen yet, but you just know it's there. That is the part of you that was created, or blueprint. That is like the blueprint of what you were born to do. I believe our DNA is our blueprint. You know, our DNA informs so much of our emotionality. We interact with our DNA. We don't express every single genome. There's a study called epigenetics that teaches that. And so we're a holistic being. You know, we're not just a body, we're not just a soul, we're not just a spirit. And there's an understanding of that that's pretty common out there now. So I would say the blueprint of what we were born to do is really in us already. But then there's the false self that says, remember when you failed? Remember when things didn't work out? Remember that one person that betrayed you? Remember what that one teacher said? Remember what that mom said? Or, you know, we start to have these kinds of blueprints, not blueprints, sorry, but life experiences. And what we've inherited in our DNA starts to speak things of fear. And I will call that your false self, because when you give into fear, it will always paralyze you. It will never move you to grow. It will never move you to dream, because fear automatically goes into a protective mode. So we get defensive, we get small, we shrink down, you know, we hunker down, we go into our strongholds. So fear will never cause advancement, never. It will always cause defensiveness. But when we start to say, okay, we deal with some of those fears and go, my past, Tony Robbins says this, my past does not equal my future. And he has us repeat that, right? A huge life coach that has coached the likes of Tom Brady, presidents, you know, nations. Who's a professed Christian, by the way. Right. He doesn't always sound like it with his language, but he is a professed Christian, and he believes in the Creator. And he says our past does not equal our future. And I look at my life, and my past doesn't equal my future. Nothing in my past would have said, "Oh yeah, go into Hollywood." Nothing, you know. So it's recognizing, okay, fear is coming from the past, whether it's inherited, whether it's experience, whether it's my own perceptions being triggered. So I can't make decisions based on fear. Got to work through them. And that's where the overcoming comes, because there is a purposeful, intentional, conscious choice to marry your heart to hope. And that's why we named our conferences Power and Hope, which, by the way, we're doing our very last Power and Hope in Eugene, Oregon, November 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. It's going to be a blowout. Please come. It's going to be amazing. You go to SoorinBacker.com and you'll find all the information. But that's why we named our conference Hope, because without the hope of a future and a hope, we can't even begin to dream. So I say we got to find the hope to start dreaming of a future that is completely, radically different than my past. My family's already radically different. I grew up in domestic violence. My husband grew up abandoned by his parents for 5 years and left in a whole different nation. Didn't see them, hear from them. You know, this was days, 50 some years ago, right? 50 years ago, before like long distance phone calls were affordable, all that stuff. And for 5 years, he was treated as an orphan, and he grew up with so much domestic violence and emotional abuse. And we two come together and we're like, how do we do this family? Well, you know what? We made our share of mistakes, but we created a family that's completely different than the past. And so have you. Many of you have already done things, are doing things that's different from your past. So stop looking back. Stop getting triggered by your past issues. And when it gets triggered, deal with it, walk through it, identify it, walk through it, heal it, but keep intentionally choosing the hope that you have. Okay, like I've never been a Hollywood producer before, but now I get to. I've never walked the red carpet, but one day, very soon, I will walk the red carpet as the author of these stories. And so I imagine, a future that's very different. And your brain can't tell the difference between imagination and reality. And did you know your brain can't tell the difference between like not do something and do something? So when you say, I'll never be like my dad, when we go back to that, the reason you become like your dad is because the brain doesn't think about never. It says, like dad. That's what it hears. For instance, when I say, hey, Sean, please don't think about a pink elephant right now. Please don't think about it. Don't think about a pink elephant. Don't think about a pink elephant. You know what you're doing? Every time I say a pink elephant, it rises up in your consciousness, right? Even though I'm saying don't think about it. And you may be saying, yeah, I'm not going to think about a pink elephant. I'm not going to think about a pink elephant. You know what's in the forefront of your consciousness? Pink elephant. Because that's how our brain operates. So we can't declare negative things. Like, I'll never be like my dad, because your brain's like, be like that, be like that. So that's why we end up like that. That's why those kind of vows don't work. But if you say, I'm going to be a healthy dad, I'm going to be a healthy mom, and this is what that looks like, and we rehearse that, then our brain and our physiology, our emotionality start to gear in that direction.
That's right. That's right. This is so important. And so, if I was to send, a lot of times I'll encounter people, let's put it this way. A lot of times I'll encounter people in public because there's a word that rises up within me to encourage them. And the first thing I say out of my mouth is that don't let any particular verbiage that I speak stop you from hearing what I'm about to share with you. Okay, and it keeps their attention, right? Because if they hear one religious, what would be classified as religious words, a lot of times you'll lose them. But this is But if I was to direct somebody one direction in the whole entire Bible, I would send them to Psalms 139, because Psalms 139 speaks of how amazing you are, how amazingly you've been created, and just all the intricacy of who you are as a human being, right? You're seen, known, you're always thought about, da 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 da. So so grateful you came on today, Soorin. So grateful. I am so looking forward. We'll have to have you on again when we're about to, hit the debut of what's going on with your new movies, and there's an S on that, movies to come, okay? Because there will be movies to come. I know for years I've spoken over my family. Every time I see a good movie, I have spoken, Father, rise up within my family movie producers. Rise them up,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
When it was just snail mail, I used to go to my my post office box every day, and I would say, I'm going to go check my $1 million check. I'm going to go get it. I'm going to go get it. Right? Well, my youngest daughter, a couple of years back, she says, "Do you know what makes me the maddest, Mom?" She goes, "I have heard my entire life you say that. Is what makes me the maddest is I will not be physically there to see you get that, because I know it's coming."
Wow.
And now a million,
Wow.
it's no longer a million. We're into the billions because of everything that the Lord's shown me. I'm like, Father, you have shown me way too much, way too much. But and what you say, that the mind cannot decipher between reality and what's in here, is truth, because we've all heard about the prisoner of war who was in a war camp, and he played a game every day in his mind. He played played a game of golf. When he was released, right? He turned around and aced it, completely aced it. So many blessings to you. Many blessings
Thank you.
to everything that surrounds you. I just what a blessing. What a blessing this is going to be for so many people. Yeah, just what a blessing. What an honor. What an honor. I just bless you. I bless everybody for coming on this episode today. And I just want to tell you, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon thee always. And until our next
Amen.
episode, blessings.